In complete darkness, far beneath where light dares to reach, something is waiting. This isn't just a story. It's a nightmare someone never woke up from. If you dare, turn off the lights, put on your headphone, and prepare to be afraid, because here, no one can hear you scream.
My mother always spoke of her childhood home in hushed tones. It was a grand old place in Iran, filled with memories, both beautiful and terrifying. The most disturbing of these memories centered around the basement, a place shrouded in fear, whispered about but never discussed openly. This is the story of my mother's cousin Reza and the summer he encountered the evil that dwelled beneath that house. Reza, a rambunctious boy of 10, was spending his summer at his grandmother's while his parents were away. He never paid much attention to the whispered warnings about the basement. He scoffed at the idea of ghosts and jinn. His grandmother, however, treated the basement door with a reverence born of fear. Reza, emboldened by youthful arrogance, saw these rituals as the ramblings of an old woman. He was determined to prove her wrong, to uncover the truth about the basement and expose the absurdity of her fears. Little did he know the basement held a darkness that would shake him to his core. The house stood at the end of a dusty lane, its once bright facade now faded and cracked. A sprawling courtyard, choked with weeds, led to the imposing front door. The house seemed to sag under the weight of its years, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at the world. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust and time. Cobwebs clung to intricately carved cornices, and shadows danced in the corners of dimly lit rooms. The courtyard, enclosed on all four sides by the house's imposing structure, was dominated by a deep well. Its rusted iron lid and the stories whispered about it made it a place of morbid fascination for Reza. But it was the basement door, tucked away under the old creaking staircase, that held the most allure. Made of thick, dark wood, it was reinforced with iron bars, resembling the entrance to a prison cell rather than a basement. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Reza's grandmother would light incense and chant prayers, fueling his desire to uncover the truth about the basement. The basement door became an obsession for Reza. He spent his days lurking near it, tracing the outline of the padlock with his finger, trying to imagine what lay beyond. One sweltering afternoon, driven by his insatiable curiosity, Reza decided to explore the basement. He waited until his grandmother was asleep, her rhythmic breathing a comforting counterpoint to the heavy silence that hung in the air. Tiptoeing past her room, he crept towards the forbidden door. The padlock, cold and heavy in his hand, seemed to pulsate with an energy that sent shivers down his spine. His heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to force it open. The metallic clang as the lock finally yielded echoed through the silent house, loud and final, like a challenge being answered. A musty, cold gust of air hit him as he opened the door, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else. Something ancient and unnameable. With a deep breath, Reza stepped across the threshold, the door groaning shut behind him, sealing him in the darkness with whatever awaited him below. The air in the basement was thick and oppressive, heavy with the weight of unseen things, as if the very walls were closing in on him. Reza fumbled for a light switch, his hand closing on cold, damp stone. The chill of the stone sent a shiver up his arm, making him hesitate for a moment. The darkness was absolute, suffocating, pressing down on him like a physical weight. It felt as though the shadows themselves were alive, wrapping around him. He took a hesitant step forward, his foot crunching on something brittle. The sound was unnervingly loud, breaking the silence like a gunshot. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the confined space, sending shivers down his spine. He paused, listening for any other noises, but the silence returned, even more oppressive. Panic began to rise in his chest, but he pushed it down, reminding himself that there was nothing to fear but fear itself. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Just as he was about to turn back, a faint glow flickered to life at the far end of the basement. It was a small, almost imperceptible light, but it was enough to catch his attention. It pulsed with an eerie green light, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the damp walls. The shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, creating an unsettling spectacle. Mesmerized, Reza stumbled towards it, each step filled with a growing sense of dread. His heart pounded in his chest, the sound echoing in his ears. As he drew closer, he realized the light was emanating from a small barred window set high in the wall. The bars were old and rusted, adding to the sense of decay. The moonlight, filtering through the water that filled the well, cast the eerie green glow that had drawn him in. The water rippled slightly, distorting the light and creating an otherworldly effect. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind extinguished the light, plunging him back into darkness. The abrupt return to blackness was disorienting, leaving him feeling more vulnerable than ever. Reza's blood ran cold, a chill creeping up his spine. The whisper was soft, barely audible, yet it cut through him like a shard of ice, sending shivers down his back. It seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, surrounding him, taunting him with an unseen presence. He spun around, searching for the source of the voice, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. The darkness seemed to press in on him, suffocating him, making it hard to breathe. He could feel unseen eyes on him, watching him, judging him, making his skin crawl. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling with fear. Only silence answered him. A silence so profound that it seemed to hum in his ears, amplifying his fear. He took a step back, then another, his hand reaching out to steady himself against the damp wall. His fingers trembling. His fingers brushed against something cold and slimy, and he recoiled in horror, a gasp escaping his lips. Panic surged through him, threatening to overwhelm him, his mind racing. He had to get out of there, now. The urgency was overwhelming. Turning, he ran blindly back the way he had come, his foot catching on something that sent him sprawling to the cold, hard floor, pain shooting through his body. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the throbbing pain in his ankle, and stumbled towards the door, his breath coming in ragged gasps, desperation driving him forward. The door loomed ahead of him, a beacon of hope in the oppressive darkness, his only chance of escape. Reza pounded on the door, his cries for help swallowed by the thick silence of the basement. His fists ached from the relentless banging, but he couldn't afford to stop. His voice grew hoarse, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. The desperation in his cries echoed off the cold, damp walls. Not while there was still a chance that someone, anyone, might hear him. Each shout was a plea, a hope that someone would come to his rescue. But his pleas were met with only an eerie silence, the kind of silence that seemed to mock his efforts, making the basement feel even more oppressive. The whispers had stopped, replaced by a heavy, expectant quiet that pressed down on him, suffocating him. It was as if the very air was waiting for something dreadful to happen. He slid down against the door, his body trembling with fear and exhaustion. Time lost all meaning. Minutes felt like hours, and hours felt like an eternity. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the occasional flicker of moonlight through the grimy window. The faint light offered no comfort, only casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. He huddled on the cold floor, his arms wrapped around his knees, his mind racing with terrifying possibilities. Each thought more horrifying than the last. Just when his hope began to dwindle, he heard it, a sound that cut through the silence like a knife. A child's cry, high-pitched and filled with an unbearable sadness, echoed through the basement. It was a sound that seemed to resonate with his very soul. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, piercing him to his core. His blood ran cold. He knew that cry. It was unmistakable. He had heard it before in his nightmares, in the hushed whispers of the housekeepers. It was a sound that haunted his dreams and now, his reality. It was the cry of a child who had died in the well many years ago. A tragic story that had been passed down through generations. A child whose spirit was said to haunt the house, seeking solace it could never find. The legend spoke of a restless soul, forever trapped in the place of its demise. The cry grew louder, more insistent, morphing into a gut-wrenching wail that seemed to tear at the very fabric of his sanity. It was a sound that demanded to be heard. Reza covered his ears, but he couldn't shut out the sound. It was as if the cry was inside his head, echoing in his mind. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the crying stopped. The silence that followed was even more deafening, leaving Reza in a state of shock and confusion. At 3 a.m. he woke up suddenly. The door to the basement was open again. A cold breeze came through the hallway, and this time he heard crying, a child's voice from below, soft, sad, and then angry. "Why did you leave me here? Did you leave me?" He screamed, but couldn't move, eyes rolled back. Grandma found him sitting in front of the basement, bleeding from the nose. A local cleric came. Reza screamed in a language no one knew. The man said, "This house is marked. That room must be sealed forever." Now the basement is sealed with concrete, but some say on summer nights you can still hear the crying. I'm still here. Do you have a terrifying story of your own, something unexplained, something you've never told anyone? Share it with us in the comments or email us your story. We might bring it to life in the next haunting tale. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might just be yours.